Because my question always was, how much of this was actual paranormal, unexplained activity, and how much of this was like black access government projects? And we can get into that a little bit.
So, explain to us a little bit about Indrid and what what the heck are we dealing with here?
Um, so yeah. So let's get into the basics. Obviously I wrote the book on it. So I've got my book handy. I'm gonna read you guys something from the book here in just a moment. But basically what happened 10 days before the big Mothman sighting took place, right? The famous Scarberry Mallet sighting. Um, there was a gentleman by the name of Woodrow Derenberger, just a regular average Joe, and he was driving home from his job. He was driving from Marietta, Ohio to Mineral Wells, West Virginia, right? They border each other. It's no big deal. So while he's driving home, he notices a very strange car that is riding his ass. And, of course, he's like, my God, this guy's rude. So he pulls over to let the car pass him. And then instead of the car passing him, it jumps up into the air and flies over his car, which cars didn't do in the 1960s. They still don't, unfortunately. And then whatever this thing was ended up looking like, the way he described it was very weird and unconventional. Usually we think of UFOs, we think of like the saucer, right? Or nowadays it's the Tic Tac, right? That's the hot new UFO out there, the sphere. This one looked like a kerosene lamp on its side. And that's the way he describes it. The way I like to describe it to people, because people also don't use kerosene lamps anymore, usually, it is a piece of candy rolled up in the wrapper, right? So two sides that are flared out, but a big bulky metal. So this craft, whatever it was, it lands in front of his vehicle, and before it's blocking the road, so he can't really get around it. So door opens up, and he's like, "Oh my God, it's gonna have tentacles, right? It'll have 50 eyeballs. What's it gonna be?" And out of the craft comes the scariest thing that you can think of. A man, some man comes out comes out of the craft. And I'm sorry, I can't take myself seriously. Um, no, really, just some guy comes out. He looks to be roughly middle aged. He looks very Italian, actually, dark hair, kind of darker skin. Looks nice. He's in a nice suit. And he approaches Woody's vehicle, and while he's approaching the vehicle, he starts communicating with Woodrow telepathically. And he's like, "Hey, sir, I'd like to have a conversation with you. Could you roll your window down?" So I know what people are thinking, right? I'm now getting to the conversation. Ashley, you totally skipped over the grinning man part. I want to read you guys exactly how Woodrow Derenberger described Indrid Cold the very first time he met him. This is what he said. He had a very pleasant appearance and was about 5 feet 10 or 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighed approximately 180 to 185 pounds. His hair was very dark and thick, and it was combed straight back over his head. He seemed to have a very good and look normal in every way. Indra did not have a weird, creepy grin about him. He was just looked normal. Um, but we'll get into the grinning man himself. Where that started, I think it was something that Keel was very well known for exaggerating a lot of the reports he got, and I think it was a Keel exaggeration. Keel was a writer, in his own right, and rightfully so. You read his books; they're very easy to read, very entertaining, and that's fine. But it's definitely morphed into something else. So this man approaches Woody's car, and he gets out. Woodrow gets out. He wasn't afraid of him. He was very unthreatening. And so they strike up a conversation. It lasts about 10 minutes. Indrid's just like, "Hey, what's that over there?" And Woody's like, "Oh, it's a city." And he's like, "Oh, we have that too, but we don't call it city. That's a weird word. We call it gathering because that's where we gather, duh." And Woody's like, "Oh, that makes sense." And, after they have a little conversation, Indrid looks at Woody. Hadn't introduced himself yet. I think he did introduce himself as Cold at that time. They call me Cold. And he said, I'll be back. He says that I'm going to come back. I want you to go. I want you to tell people about what you saw today. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show everybody me. I'm going to introduce myself. It's going to be a big party. So go tell the whole town about it. It'll be wonderful. So he does. He goes back home to his wife and two kids, and he is very visibly shook by what just happened. And he starts kind of telling his wife, and his wife is like, "Hold on." Yells at the kids, tell the kids to go to bed, and she's like, "Repeat exactly what you're saying." And he's telling her, I guess I met a man from space. I don't really know. He was driving this really weird car. It's kind of ugly. I don't know how I feel about it." And she's like, "Okay, well, hold on, hold on, hold on." So they call the police immediately. And the police show up, and of course they interview him. But the police don't show up by themselves. As a matter of fact, they showed up with an officer from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton,
Mhm.
Ohio. The officer sits down with him and says, "Look, I believe you. We have record of these weird things in the sky. I just want to know what you saw. Tell us what you saw." And what he does, he tells them the whole thing. And again, it's pretty uneventful. It's not very long. But he does make contact with something that came from the sky. And then they all kind of go about their business. Well, people then, and he started telling people whatever this thing was, said that it's coming back. So people then kind of ran with this. It made big news. It was all over the media at the time. And my God, people were so bored in the 1960s. This was really cool and interesting for them. So they started flocking to the Derenberger home. And as you know, they're kind of camping outside of their house waiting for this guy to show up. And eventually, Woodrow starts having more telepathic communication with this gentleman. At that point in time, I think it was maybe their second or third conversation. He finally tells him, "My name is Indrid Cold." And and what he's like, "Listen, people are starting to think I'm nuts. Are you coming back here?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course. Just chill, bro. It's happening." And so one day, Woodrow comes home from work. His house is, of course, flooded with tons of people because it always was at that point in time. Everybody's there to see the man from space. But he goes into the home. His wife's like, "Come in here, come," giving him the eye, but being very discreet. And she leads him to the back of the house. And guess who's there? Our buddy, Indrid Cold. He's not just there by himself. At that point, he's there with a second gentleman that he introduces as Demo Hassan. So Indrid brought a buddy, and they all sat in the back of the house and hung out for a long time, just chit-chatting about their own lives, about their human lives, about their not really human lives. And things just kind of escalate from there. I mean, that's the initial meeting. But Woodrow Derenberger goes on to, curate a lifelong friendship with this man and with all of the other space people. And what I mean by that, when I say that, Woodrow started taking trips to Indrid's planet. Indrid comes from a planet called Lanulos. He is Lanulosian, okay? And it's very much like our planet, except way more advanced. These people, they live about twice the amount of time that we did. So they live to be about 200 years old, whereas we're like 80s, 90s is really pushing it now. But they're very normal, but they'll have kind of alternative ways of doing things. They have baby policies where you can only have so many children, but they have a very low divorce rate because everybody can read each other's mind all the time, so they don't really have a lot of disagreements because anything can really just be solved by communicating properly. They walk around naked because it's not a big deal to them. There's just a lot of very euphoric things about Lanulos, but it's not just Lanulos. Dima Hassan, I believe he was from a different planet. I think he was allegedly from Saturn or Jupiter or one of those. There's tons of other people involved here. So Indrid would show up and he would have a buddy with him. Sometimes they're women, sometimes they're men. Sometimes it's his kids.
As soon as I had stopped, there was a door opened in the side of this vehicle, and this man stepped out and came directly to me, or came to the truck. He walked to the right-hand side of the truck, and he told me to roll down the window. He asked me to roll down the window on my right-hand side of my truck. And I had done what he asked. And this man stood there, and he first asked me what I was called. And I knew he meant my name, and I told him my name. And he asked me, he said, why are you frightened? He said, don't be frightened, we wish you no harm. He said, we mean you no harm, we wish you only happiness. And I told him my name, and when I told him my name, he said he was called Cold. That was the name that he was called by. And he asked me what the city of Parkersburg, he pointed to the lights. He didn't point, but he gave the impression that he was pointing, and he asked me what that was called. And I told him it was Parkersburg. It was a city, a town. And he asked me if most all the people lived in this city or town. And I explained to him that it was a place of business. It's where we transacted our business. That the people lived in communities, outlying communities, most of the people. And when I told him that this was a city, he said that where his home was, that was called a gathering.
From. So, we have a tactical commander who's actually in charge in the field. And then we have an operational commander who's in charge of the whole expedition for the entire week or 3 days or however long it is. So our tactical commander goes out comes up with a plan of operation, with a concept of operation. And what we decided that evening is we were going to have multiple teams set around the periphery of the meadow, equipped with a thermal and a night vision.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to have a single member, Bob in this case. And, Bob was just like a friggin', weird magnet. And so what he was going to do is walk across the top of the ridge solo and see if he could drive anything down to us, and also see if he could observe anything. Now, the foliage was very heavy in July, so the odds of him observing something were pretty remote. But, we had a good vantage point down there in the bottom between this ridge and the large creek. So we got set up. Bob came on the radio, said, hey, I forgot something back at base camp. I need to go back and get it. And so, the tactical commander said, that's fine. We're just going to stay on station here, go back, get what you need to do. Let us know when you get to the bottom of the trail and start going up the ridge. So we're patiently waiting. And then Bob comes over the radio and he goes, hey guys, I'm at the tree across the trail, which is a really well-known landmark for all the people that research this area. And he says, I don't know how I got here. So it's like, okay, first thing I did is our medic, contacted me and said, I think this is medical. So he got on the radio and he said, okay, Bob, how do you feel? Yeah, I feel fine. I just don't remember getting to this landmark. I don't remember the 15-minute walk from base camp to here. And he says, okay, do you have a headache? No, because we're thinking maybe a stroke or something. Okay, did you fall? No. Okay, is your vision, messed up? No, my vision's fine. Repeat Mary Had a Little Lamb to make sure that he, his words weren't slurred. Can you grimace? Do you have, bilateral muscle function on both sides of the face? Yes. So, we all walk around with a thing called a normalcy box. And what we do is when we encounter something weird, we quickly reach into our normal box and we pull out something that kind of fits. And we said, that's what it is, because we get comfort at that. That's how human beings work. And so we reached into our comfort box and said, okay, Bob must have just been so focused on the mission, in our outing here, that he just forgot. Like sometimes you drive up to work and you're like, okay, I don't remember the drive here. So we panned it off as normal. So they see Bob come down off the ridge. They're watching his headlamps. They bring their thermals up and they see his heat signature. Okay, they can tell it's him, hot against the surrounding ambient temperature. So they drop their night vision, or not drop their thermal, and about the time they do that, where he was standing, they see an orb of light, a sphere of plasma. And this sphere moved about 150, 200 meters and then winked out. And the distance and the speed it moved, we calculated at about 23 to 26 miles per hour. It was really moving, faster than a human being can move. They quickly brought their thermal back up and are scanning, and they see a man-shaped heat signature where the light went out, where the sphere of light blinked out. They quickly get on their radio and they say, "Bob, are you okay?" And they're watching the heat signature through their thermal, and they see the heat signature bring a radio up to its mouth, key it, and at that time they hear Bob's voice say, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" And they stopped. And they thought for a while. They said, "Bob, you need to come over to us." So Bob makes his way over to these two gentlemen. They say, "Bob, how do you feel?" "I'm fine." "Why?" "Why? We saw you turn into a ball of light and fly across the meadow." And he says, "No, I didn't. I just walked over here." They said, "No, you had to experience something. What was it like? I mean, you were moving." So he goes, "No, I walked over here because I'm too old to run. I'm not running anywhere, especially over this terrain." And they got into an argument. So when you boil it down, and I remember, right after that happened, getting into arguments with people. But what actually happened is you had two realities existing in the same space at the same time, kind of like the dual slit experiment in quantum theory, where you'll have light acts as a particle and as a wave, but both at the same time until the observer affects the state of matter.